Almost as soon as the movie started, I got an uneasy feeling. Something just wasn't right. And to be honest, even now, I still can't put my finger on exactly what was wrong, because the beginning of the movie is definitely not its weakest part. But I could already sense that I wasn't gonna love it. It's just something intangible, I guess, but you kinda know these things, right? But I was still hoping it would pick up and get better, but unfortunately, it didn't. And the problems just started becoming more and more obvious, and they just kept piling up too. And the few highlights that were there really couldn't make up for how weak the rest of the movie felt. And it's not even that it's outright bad, it's just sort of bland and uninteresting, very mediocre. But let's just rewind and get back to the beginning and go from there. So first of all, the movie immediately tries to dismiss 28 weeks later, right? The previous movie. There's no cure now, there are no immune people, and the spread of the virus into mainland Europe was stopped. And I didn't really have a problem with that, and I completely get why they did it. They wanted to go in a different direction with the story, and they found a pretty simple way to do that, without completely just ignoring the second movie. They sorta acknowledged that it exists, while pretty much dismissing what it did. That's fine, no problem. But then we have the main characters, and that's when the problems really start, because I more or less just didn't care about any of them. Now I do think that Aaron Taylor Johnson did a fine job with what he had to work with. He was pretty good, I liked him, but I still didn't really care about his character, if that makes sense. I also really liked Jodie Comer's performance, and she was the only one I actually cared about at any point. But only toward the end of the movie, because for the most part, she was kinda treated more like a plot device than anything else. But the real issue for me was the kid, who is the actual main character here. Because while the performance was fine, it wasn't great. And the bigger issue was that I just didn't care about him at all. And he's the core of the movie, so if that doesn't work, then the whole thing sort of falls apart. And I think that was the crux of the issue for me here. But the problems don't end there, because I also think that the movie made a lot of other mistakes, like the questionable CGI and green screen in some parts. Particularly when they're running across the quote-unquote bridge to their little island. It just looked bad, like really bad. And in a movie like this, that's trying to be grounded and gritty, it just took me right out of it, and I was barely in to begin with. But also, there are different types of zombies now. Slow, fat, crawling ones. And big alphas with huge dongs. Like, how did those fat ones even develop? They just used to be people, right? So, if you're obese, you become one of them? Question mark? For some inexplicable reason. I don't know, it just felt unnecessary and kinda silly. And the alphas just felt like an evolution of the dad in the second movie. Which I already didn't like in that one, so now they're back and worse than ever. Yeah, I didn't care for that either. Not to mention that the British Isles have been quarantined for decades already at this point. So how the hell are there still that many zombies alive? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Unless they can reproduce now, which they sorta seem to be able to, but the only offspring we see isn't even infected. So how the hell does that work? I don't know, but I do know that the math doesn't seem to add up. Because there wouldn't be enough people left to keep the zombie population very high. Even if the zombies didn't starve and actually survived by hunting animals. So already the whole setup and the premise is just a complete mess that makes very little sense. And then you have a story on top of that which is okay at best, but definitely nothing to write home about. But it's essentially about this kid whose mom is sick. So he wants to get her to a doctor who can help her. And that's fine, I guess, if you gave a crap about the kid. But I didn't, so the story fell flat too. And as I already alluded to, the only time I felt any sort of emotional connection to anything going on in this movie was toward the end. And that was 100% because of how good Jodie Comer was, and nothing else. But unfortunately, the problems don't even end there either, because this is by far the least intense of the three movies so far. There's just not that much zombie horror going on, and I hate to say it, but the trailer was kinda misleading. It sold this as an intense and dark and gritty movie, like the previous two, but it's really not. It's a lot less bleak, it's a lot less exciting, and it's a lot more of a drama, and unfortunately not a very good one. The trailer was one of the best trailers I have ever seen in my life. And I just wish I could say the same about the movie itself. But yeah, I really didn't love this movie. But there were a few highlights too, like I mentioned. Like that bit about the annoying Swedish guy's girlfriend's face. That shit was funny, man. But also some of the performances were great, and that includes Ralph Fiennes, who actually had an interesting and compelling character. But it's probably the only interesting and compelling character in the entire movie. And he comes in pretty late, and he alone can't save the movie. And if a minor character in the third act steals the show from characters we've been following the entire time, we've got a pretty big issue here. Which I guess brings me to the very end of the movie, which incidentally was my favorite part. Because the movie just loses its goddamn mind and goes completely bonkers. I mean, it's like you're watching a completely different film all of a sudden. Like a zany zombie apocalypse version of a Clockwork Orange. And it actually became fun for about a minute and a half, and then the movie just ends. It sort of teases what the next movie is gonna be, and it's either gonna be a completely different type of movie with a completely different tone, and it could actually be fun, unlike this one, or it's gonna be a complete mess. I mean, I'm kinda thinking it'll be a mess, but we'll see next year, I guess. But at least this one has me intrigued. And had the movie ended a couple minutes earlier, I would have walked away from it utterly disillusioned and completely over it. But now I'm kinda looking forward to seeing what kind of a train wreck the next one's gonna be. I probably won't pay to see it in the theater though, but I know it's already been shot and it's not even directed by Danny Boyle. So who the hell knows what's gonna happen with that one. All I know is it can't possibly be less interesting and more forgettable than this one. But yeah, 28 years later did not live up to the hype, not even slightly. And had it not been for the absurd ending, I would have walked away from it feeling like this franchise is dead. And to be honest, it probably is, and probably should be. Because if you can't come up with a better sequel than this in 20 years, you should probably just let it rest. But what you shouldn't let rest is that like button. And if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, don't be afraid to sub to the channel. Also, feel free to comment below how this was a low IQ take, and the franchise is actually alive and well, and not a Walking Dead at all. But yeah, I think that's about it for today, and see you next time.